7.1 Lifestyle Factors, Beth Gates. There are lots of different lifestyle factors that can impact a person's health and well-being. I've listed 5, and I will talk about smoking, alcohol, stress, physical activity levels, and diet. So I'll start with alcohol. Alcohol is obviously a drink that legally can be consumed at the age of 16, obviously in your own household with parents' permission, and it can be bought and consumed on your own accord at the age of 18. That's in the UK. Alcohol contains ethanol, and the consumption of alcohol can have many different effects. Some positive, but mostly negative. As a result of the negative effects of alcohol, there are recommendations or guidelines set in terms of how much should be consumed. So to keep the health risks of alcohol to a low level, it's recommended that both men and women do not drink any more than 14 units a week. Now you may be wondering what units are. So 1 unit of alcohol is equivalent to 10 millilitres of pure alcohol. So this might be a half pint of normal strength cider, or a small shot of spirits at approximately 40% strength. And the strength will often be written as ABV on bottles of alcohol. And you can work out how many units there are in any drink by multiplying the total volume of a drink in millilitres by its ABV, or strength, measured as a percentage, and dividing the result by 1,000. So you can see on the slide that equation there for figuring out how many units are in a drink. If you do drink 14 units a week, it's better to spread the consumption over a few days, 3 or more, as opposed to binge drinking in one sitting. And pregnant women are advised not to drink at all, as it could have health complications for the baby and affect their baby when they are born, as well as potentially causing issues with the pregnancy itself. The reason it's recommended for alcohol consumption to be spread out is because it means that your liver is not having to absorb that alcohol in such abundances. It's spread out more evenly, so it's more tolerable for the liver, making it have less of a negative impact. However, obviously, drinking 14 units a week, above 14 units a week, is not recommended at all, because it could have major health complications. Statistics show that alcohol is one of the leading factors in the causes for deaths in the UK, whether that's related, like health-related problems as a result of alcohol, or injuries from the effects of alcohol. So there were actually 339,000 estimated admissions related to alcohol consumption in 2015 to 2016. This is 3% higher than 2014 to 15, and 22% higher than 2005 to 2006, according to the National Archives on Alcohol. This shows that the consumption of alcohol is increasing as the years go on, potentially, and also shows that perhaps as a country we're drinking more alcohol at a time, which therefore obviously causes larger effects that could result in people being admitted to hospitals. And again, according to the National Archives on Alcohol, in 2015 there were 6,813 deaths which were related to the consumption of alcohol. And this accounts for 1.4% of all deaths in the UK. this highlights just how influential alcohol is towards health issues and injuries that could potentially lead to death, as the number of deaths related to alcohol is so high. There's a clear issue here that needs to be addressed, and the fact that there's a continually increasing number of admissions to hospitals related to alcohol consumption shows that perhaps we haven't got the message yet behind how much of a negative impact alcohol can have on our health. So that leads me to look into why people consume alcohol. If we know that alcohol is bad for us, what are people's reasons for consuming it? So there are obviously many different reasons for the consumption of alcohol. I've outlined a few. So first of all, there's the social influence. So often people will choose to drink simply because it's seen as a social event in a way. People will say, let's go for a drink, or they might have a work do where it's at a pub or something like that. It's an opportunity for people to have a conversation, sitting down and drinking, and it's just kind of seen as the regular thing to do, as to sitting down and having an alcoholic drink instead of non-alcoholic drinks. Other people might consume alcohol to deal with their stress. So perhaps they might have had a bad day. They might sit down, have a glass of wine, try and relax, sit back and relax. You also have the influence of peer pressure, and this is especially prominent in younger ages, as they're more vulnerable to other people's opinions and actions. So often, if a teenager's peers are drinking alcohol, they're likely to feel the pressure to drink alcohol as well, and therefore they choose to consume alcohol so that they fit in with their peers. And often, people will physically pressure others into drinking alcohol, and like I said, this is more prominent at younger ages because they're more susceptible to other people's opinions and other people's actions. So, as you can see, there are obviously many different reasons people consume alcohol. And there are obviously many other reasons beyond that. But there clearly needs to be more education, perhaps, on the effects of alcohol to prevent people from drinking it in such large amounts due to the high risk of alcohol. There needs to be more education to ensure that people don't put themselves at that risk if they go over that recommended 14 units a week. So the effects of alcohol can be broken down into short-term effects and long-term effects. The short-term effects, as a general overview, are injuries or accidents, violent behaviour, and alcohol poisoning. So looking more deeply into this, alcohol suppresses the release of vasopressin, a hormone produced by the brain that sends signals to the kidneys, causing them to retain fluid. As a result, alcohol increases urination and excess loss of fluids. The mild dehydration that results likely contributes to hangover symptoms such as thirst, fatigue, and headaches. And it could also contribute to lowered inhibitions, leading to poor judgment of social situations where you might act out in social situations, perhaps in an aggressive manner, or start doing things a bit riskier than you would usually do. And this could also lead to a loss of coordination. So when you drink alcohol, the immediate effect is that you start to lose coordination. You're likely to stumble a bit more as you walk, perhaps can't balance as well. In addition to this, your blood pressure raises with the consumption of alcohol, and you might actually begin to have mood swings as well as a result of alcohol consumption, where you'd have low moods and sudden high moods. Obviously, a loss of coordination and lowered inhibitions could lead to injuries or accidents, as you're less balanced, less able to think straight, so you start to put yourself in situations where you're more likely to be injured or get in accidents, and your loss of coordination means that you're less able to carry out everyday tasks, putting you at risk of injuring yourself as well. The lowered inhibitions that could lead to poor judgment of social situations obviously could potentially lead to violent behaviour. Often people would begin to act out a bit more aggressively when consuming alcohol, which could lead to them getting in trouble with other people, perhaps in fights, and also in trouble with the police, potentially, at the extremes of that violent behaviour. And of course, you also have alcohol poisoning as a short-term effect as well. So alcohol poisoning could potentially lead to vomiting and, at the extremes, fits as well. So obviously, all of those short-term effects have high risks as well, but the long-term effects include effects on your organs and your body's systems themselves. So the long-term effects of alcohol could potentially be heart disease, strokes, liver disease, liver cancer, and pancreatitis. Obviously, the long-term effects, where it causes diseases to the organs or cancers, they're obviously a lot more serious and a lot harder to manage and deal with than the short-term effects. Short-term effects obviously only last for a short while, so you won't necessarily feel those effects the following day or following 2 days after, whereas the long-term effects are potentially permanent and potentially not reversible at all. As a result, like previously mentioned, those statistics on the number of deaths, they link very closely to those negative effects of alcohol, because the short-term effects are likely to lead to lots of hospital admissions, because people are likely to injure themselves or hurt themselves due to lowered inhibitions and lowered judgment and coordination. And the long-term effects are also likely to link to potential deaths or potential admissions to hospitals due to those diseases that need to be treated as well as a result of alcohol. With alcohol also obviously becomes the potential addiction to alcohol. So alcohol is addictive, and it's very easy to fall into that addiction with alcohol, and the addiction is often why people consume, because they feel that they can't stop consuming alcohol. And obviously with addiction comes the tendency to drink alcohol over the recommended 14 units a week. So addiction puts people at a much higher risk from alcohol, as it's harder for them to stop and harder for them to control themselves with the alcohol. Overall, though, alcohol obviously does have the initial effect of potentially making people feel a bit happier or more confident potentially, but more generally the negative effects outweigh the positive effects of alcohol by a landslide, which is why it's important to stick to that recommendation of 14 units a week, because going over that could cause some serious health complications.